Okay, well, thank you very much, Alex. So far, you're fitting my model, which is that when I tell an economist that environmentalism is a religion, they all say, well, yeah, you know, it's kind of a no-brainer. But they recognize there's probably some truth, but they're all very nervous with the idea that economics is a religion. It works the other way. If I tell an environmentalist that economics is a religion, oh, it's a no-brainer. I mean, any number of environmentalists that I've dealt with said, oh, yeah, it's obvious. But then, and some of them, they didn't realize that I was saying the same thing about environmentalism. So they came in for a shock maybe a few months later after they had endorsed my book and then discovered all the nasty things that I had said about well, they weren't necessarily nasty. When I talk about religion, some people use it as a pejorative word. It's not a pejorative word for me. It's just a factual word, so to speak. In fact, I actually believe that everybody has a religion. I have one too. It's sometimes hard for me to figure out. But so it's really a question, unlike most people and most social scientists, I actually, believe we can discuss religion. And we don't have to have a holy wars all the time, although it seems like we somehow end up with them disconcertingly frequently. The other thing I'll say is that this project, and it is a project, I mean, I've been engaged in it now for 20 years, looking at both economics and environmentalism as religions. It started out, and it continues to have a very practical purpose, which is to understand the world. And I find that I can't understand the world and what's happening unless I incorporate a large religious element. And I thought I'd just give a little example. This is just, and I see hundreds of these examples every year. Well, maybe not every year, but dozens every year, maybe hundreds, maybe even hundreds. This is from the New York Times, just the last few days. It's an article called Green But Still Feeling Guilty. And it's about a Colorado couple. And I'm going to read from the article briefly. It's about their practices. It goes on, the renovated stairway is made from reclaimed barnwood. Their furniture is also made from recycled wood and steel. In fact, the coffee table is wood that was reclaimed twice, having been salvaged from reclaimed wood that was being made into flooring. They use only natural cleaning products and are constantly drinking out of their Brita pitcher, so there's no need for disposable water bottles. All their personal care products are organic, and Mr. Dorfman's clothes are made from organic cotton and recycled materials. But then they confess that they like disposable diapers and haven't been able to get over them. And this, though, has provoked a feeling, as they put it, not only do I feel guilt, I feel hypocritical. Now, I submit there's no way, I mean, this is not practically, a set of practical measures to protect or preserve the environment in any way that anyone, reasonably could understand them. This is a set of religious rituals. It's, to me anyway, it seems transparently obvious. I think anyone else. Now, it raises the question, though, what's the religion? And so you have a lot of articles like this, but you don't have very many people who say, what's the religion? And where do these where do these rituals derive? What are the implicit kind of faith beliefs that lead you to feel that these, doing all these recycling and other things make you a morally better person? And make you feel righteous or make you feel hypocritical when you violate one of these beliefs. And so that's kind of what the project is about on the environmental side. I think economists, they don't have as many rituals like this, but they have other characteristics that can't be explained by normal, conventional, rational analysis. And now I will say, and again, this is, as has already been mentioned, it's a somewhat unusual book, or maybe very unusual book. In fact, it doesn't seem to have any followers. So which is a problem that I have. And because there's always somebody who's nervous about this religious side, because most people are either economists or environmentalists. And if they're a little bit concerned that if they get in on the take here, that might be, the fire might be returned at them. And then how are they going to deal with it? But anyway, I was at the Interior Department, actually. So this whole project actually came out of very practical experience. I worked in the Interior Department 18 years, from 1975 to 1993. And during that time, I observed the policy-making process. I was in the office of the secretary. It was a very interesting experience. But one of the things that I noticed is it didn't fit any of the models that I was used to, or that they had taught me in graduate school, or that I was reading about in books that were derived from social science. You know, it wasn't maximizing economic benefits. It wasn't even, you know, a conflict of interest. Actually, it was a value struggle, you know, where what the Interior Department was doing was, you know, taking actions that were symbolically defining what American values were. And that had more to do with a lot of the policy making in the department, especially things like wilderness or rangeland, which were low value, than any normal economic or political considerations. And gradually it dawned on me 30 years ago that this was really religion. And so I didn't do anything about it for quite a while. I was a little intimidated to write about it myself. And, but eventually I got up my courage and wrote a book, and so here I am. But anyway, the purpose of the whole thing was really, in some sense, to understand, and I claim, although I'm an expert in the Interior Department, but I claim that the more I looked around other areas of American policy making, the more I felt that in these areas as well, you know, we were looking at fundamental value conflicts, that people were uncomfortable with it. They didn't want to be seeming to be fighting about religion in public. So they essentially masked all their value convictions under a pseudoscientific, superficial presentation. But if you actually probed a little bit beneath the, you know, the scientific explanations they offered, you basically found a religion. And, but they didn't want to call it a religion, so they had to offer all these disguises. So the book, The New Holy Wars, is kind of like, you know, trying to reveal the emperor's, you know, real appearance without all the superficial clothes. And and that's kind of what I've been doing, is saying, well, you know, what are the people, if you get rid of this, what do they really believe? And so it's also, you know, as I was saying, partly a reflection on the fact that, you know, I basically felt that a lot of the models that I was using just weren't able to explain the world. So this led to the, you know, various books and so forth. Now, getting to economics, in what sense what am I saying if I say economics is a religion? Now, some people say, oh, well, you just mean this metaphorically, or you just like to be provocative, and you hope you'll sell more books if you call it a religion. But that's, I mean, maybe that's in my subconscious, I don't know, but that's not what I think I'm doing. And I mean, I mean it literally, that economics is a religion. And in what sense? Okay, well, basically it derives from the fact that a faith in economic progress, I would say, has been a dominant religion of the 20th century. And believing that basically economic progress can save the world and make for a vastly better place, lead ultimately to heaven on earth if we actually perfect the economic system. I argue, and I don't have time to go through all the people who've said these things, but if you read the book, you can find a number of examples that this has been, you know, pervasive as a belief throughout at least the last 150 years. And then, if you believe, though, that economic progress can save the world, what will your priesthood be? Well, it'll be the people who know about how to achieve economic progress. That is to say, your priesthood will be economists. So what will economists do? Their efforts will be dedicated to revealing the true workings of the economy and thus the path of maximal economic growth. And if you believe this will save the world, then economic knowledge is your new Bible, so to speak. The place where you go to learn how to perfect things. And when I talk about perfection, through progress, it's moral perfection as well as material perfection. Okay, now what about environmentalism? Well, it's not exactly a social science, but it's actually in a lot of ways similar to economics. It has a different set of high priests. They're biologists and ecologists. They also claim a scientific status, and beneath that lies all these moral presuppositions. And so environmentalism, like economics, is also a project of social change. It's a project at improving and ideally perfecting the earth. It has its own moral standards, and in many other ways, it functions like a secular religion. So they're both religions. However, they have very different perceptions of the world. And they think, for example, this is obviously a critical one, of the relationship of humans and nature in very different terms, and with all kinds of policy implications. For economists, nature is, quote, we call it a natural resource. That means something we use to produce more, to increase human welfare, for the benefit of the economy, and it's essentially seen in a utilitarian sense. But for environmentalists, maybe not all, and I need to say that environmentalism is diverse. And some people would say that Resources for the Future, which is an organization dominated by economists, is an environmental organization. They're pretty much exempt from everything I'm saying here. And they're actually believers in economic religion, but who want to move economic religion to take better account of environmental amenities. And so there are people like that, actually, maybe quite a few. But what I would, when you get to the distinctive contribution that environmentalism has made to contemporary debate, where they're introducing really new ideas and new values, or as I would say, a new religion, one of the main areas is this issue of how do we relate to nature. And for environmentalists, nature has what they call intrinsic value, and that is it's outside human benefit. So we don't have to establish human benefits in order to value or protect or want to do good things for nature. Or nature is seen, and the word the creation is used throughout environmental discussions, as a place where we can go to learn. Now, the environmentalists don't always say God, but what they really mean is learned about the mind of God as it was manifested in the creation. God's not in the creation, that would be pantheism, but the creation was a product of divine design. And so this, if you think of things this way, it's going to be an immensely spiritual experience. You go into the wilderness, what are you doing? You're actually encountering something created and designed by God, and as a reflection of the mind of God, you're learning about God. And this is a very old way of thinking of things in Christianity, goes back more than 1,000 years. And so, in fact, throughout the history of Christianity, they've talked about two ways of actually directly learning from God about the world. One is by reading the book of the Bible, which is a direct divine revelation, but the other is by going into nature. And especially until the modern era, people believed that nature was pretty much the original creation and it hadn't been changed much. And so it was seen as a revelation of God's thinking. Now, of course, we know now, that we have Darwin and all these other things, but I claim that really when environmentalists go to the wilderness, they're still perceiving and experiencing the wilderness in this classical Christian way. although they would probably, they would be confused, actually. If you asked an environmentalist, why are you so spiritually affected by the wilderness? If you're a Darwinian scientist and all the rest of it, they really wouldn't be able to answer the question. So I claim or argue in the book and go to great lengths. I describe something in several chapters which I call environmental creationism. And this is something that's definitely not going to go over very well with the environmental community. But I argue there that there are actually rather surprising affinities and connections between the way environmentalists see nature and the way Christian creationists see nature. And that is, they both see it as essentially, directly a product of God's work. And so I would argue that a lot of evolutionary biologists and so forth, who also are deeply spiritual environmentalists, are suffering from a kind of an internal schizophrenia, and that they don't know how to exactly resolve. So anyway, this conflict, which manifests itself in lots of other ways, can often become embittered. It's remarkable how much difficulty economists and environmentalists have talking to each other, how much, even hatred they feel for each other at times, and there's like heretics or sinners in each other's presence. There's even an environmental philosopher who wrote an article in a quite respectable environmental journal called "Why Environmentalists Should Hate Mainstream Economists." And that was the title of the article. And this is a professor at Georgia Tech or in the philosophy department or something, one of those Georgia institutions. And so we get then a whole host of tensions and conflicts. I might mention that we have, for example, when it comes to something like, what are the cathedrals of the religion? And this is something I write about in the book. And I would say that when people in the 20th century, especially the middle of the earlier or the first half of the 20th century, visited a dam, people would go, I call them economic pilgrims, and they would go to a dam, and how would they perceive it? They would perceive it in quasi-religious, or actually I would say really religious terms. It was a symbol of progress. The dam was controlling nature, a raging river, for the purpose of generating power, creating water for irrigation, controlling flooding, providing all these benefits, which were all symbols of progress. And when I worked at the Interior Department, they had a lot of murals that had been painted in the 30s as part of the job generation, and they were like the big symbols in the painting were not always, but often a large dam, and and so this was and in the Soviet Union, actually, it's kind of remarkable. They had dams too. In fact, before we were in a space war, we were in a dam war with the Soviet Union. And none of the dams actually were that much good, or not none of them, but a lot of them were actually a waste of money. But they fulfilled a spiritual, symbolic need on both continents. So what's happened to the view of a dam? Well, David Brower, who was for many years the head of the Sierra Club, is one of the leading environmentalists of the the second half of the 20th century. He said, I hate all dams, period. And so why? Well, for him, the dam symbolized the same thing, which is human control over nature. But for him, that was evil. And for him, it was, nature was innocent, and we had defiled it and we had erased a part of God's creation, if you want to put it maybe in a more theological way. So it was an evil thing to do. And on the other hand, what are the cathedrals of environmentalism? Well, they're wilderness areas. And so what characterizes a wilderness area? Basically, it's the minimal amount of human contact, places that have had the least amount of human contact. So your kind of, your most worshipped sites are defined by the absence of a human presence. We see this for also, it's not just wilderness areas, but let's say the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which has obviously become a huge symbol for the environmental movement. How is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge characterized? It's characterized as one of the last untouched places on the Earth. And so it's the absence of human impact which allows us to go there and see the creation in its original form, or at least you might be able to imagine it that way. It's probably not true, but you don't have to it's easy to get into the mood of thinking of it that way. So that's one of the many differences. So it's essentially you're seeing, in some sense, and just to wrap it up, I had a lot more here, but I'm condensing it very rapidly as we're going along. I'm not good at time management, but I do know that I'm getting to the end. But it's a lot of it. I mean, at some fundamental level, it's kind of a verdict on what you might call the modern project of rationally directed economic progress, organization of society to maximize production and economic welfare, but not just because you like economic welfare. It represents a conviction that the real source of evil and sin in the world has been material scarcity. I mean, you see this in extreme form in Marxism. And so it's economic deprivation or desperation, and that's what drives people to do bad things. So if you have that diagnosis for the presence of sin in the world, then you have a fairly straightforward route of salvation. Basically, you eliminate economic scarcity, which is what Marxism was all about. And he prophesied, or he thought capitalism was actually necessary because it would lead to the elimination of scarcity, and that would be heaven on earth. So you move along an economic path. You reject other explanations. What would be other explanations of evil in the world? One would be the fall in the Garden of Eden. Well, that's just an old myth. So you can reject that one. A more tempting one might be a genetic explanation. People are evil because of their genes. And that one is obviously fraught with danger. And so people are not really going to go for that. And what's left, basically, that people are shaped by their exterior environments. These environments, the most important part of it is economics. If you want to perfect the world, you perfect the economic environment. So what does environmentalism say? It says that's all wrong. It's actually, we were much better off before all of this. And okay, so what did modern efficiency get us? Oh, well, it got us the Holocaust, for example, which was old-fashioned anti-Semitism married to modern economic efficiency. It got us atom bombs, and we might kill ourselves, and in the end. And so the modern project of progress, now even economists have more doubts about it, but that basically is the object of environmental criticism. And you can see this with Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, which was the seminal book starting the environmental movement. I mean, until that, or in the 50s, DDT had been considered a miracle drug of modern chemistry. And Rachel Carson came along and said, no, it's not true. All these modern chemicals and so forth are actually doing terrible things. We've worshiped progress, but it's blinded us to all the negative sides, and in fact, a lot of the negative sides are terrible. And we have to get off this kick. And so that's where environmentalism has been coming from. And if you have these different perspectives, and now a lot of people mix them together in their own practical day-to-day thinking, but if you go to the priests who actually take them, the full logic of these things, you get completely clashing views of the world and about what we should be doing in public policy in places like the Interior Department. And so in the Interior Department, if it's economic religion, we want to maximize progress in natural resources. If it's environmental religion, we want to protect nature from all these bad things that human beings have been doing, which is, we know we can't get rid of all civilization, but we could try to minimize it and restore it. So restoration, since we've already ruined so much of it, restoration is one of the main parts of the environmental agenda. Okay, I went over a little bit.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob.